Hello everyone, and welcome to Colin's webinar. Today's webinar is titled Introducing the New Edition of Colin's International Primary Maths, and that's exactly what we will be doing, showing you some of the features of the new maths course we've got. It's a slightly different webinar to ones we've done before. If you've been to one of our Colin's webinars before, it'll be structured slightly different. We'll start initially with the presentation, which is recorded. Peter unfortunately couldn't be with us live, so he's recorded the presentation for us. That's about 25 minutes long. So during that, that's just a time to watch the presentation. Then after that, I'm delighted that Holly is joining myself to take some questions at the end, which will take as long as we need to, up to the hour. My name is Rob Thompson. I should have introduced myself first. I'm the International Sales Director for Colin's Learning, and Holly, who's joining us for the questions at the end, is the editor who worked on this new edition of International Primary Maths. We will keep questions, please, in the question and answer box. For those that aren't familiar, you can find that towards the bottom of your screen. The chat really just for hellos and any other information that you should need. We'll answer all the questions at the end rather than during the presentation. So we'll come back to that. You'll see Holly and I appear again at the end of the presentation. Ideally, if you could all stay on mute, that will help us to make the presentation a lot more smoother. It is also being recorded, so if you miss a part of it for any reason, or if you feel that any of your colleagues would like to see it, they can get a recording of it. We'll send some details of that to you afterwards. And we know that sometimes people want to have a certificate of attendance. They will be available. Right at the end of the presentation, we will leave the screen on the contact details, and that's got our email addresses. So you can contact us there, either for a certificate or for recordings, or if there's any other questions that you might have in more detail. If you don't want to ask any of the questions in the Q&A, you can always email us. We're always happy to get those emails. So that's really it from me for the introduction. I'm going to hand it over to the recording now, and we'll come back and pick up some questions a little bit later. Okay, thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Peter Clark, and I'm Series Editor of Colin's International Primary Maths. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about the new edition of the scheme and how it supports the revised Cambridge Primary Mathematics Curriculum Framework. I'm also going to briefly highlight how the scheme aims to promote effective teaching and learning in primary mathematics. I want to begin by briefly highlighting some of the more important features of the new Cambridge Curriculum Framework. It is recommended by Cambridge that schools begin teaching the revised framework from September 2021, with the first new Cambridge progression tests available from 2022 and the new Cambridge checkpoint tests taking place in 2023. As with the previous 2011 framework, the curriculum is organised into strands and sub-strands, and in the revised framework, these have been reorganised slightly. In the new framework, there are 3 strands: number, geometry and measure, and statistics and probability. This slide also shows the sub-strands within each strand. Underlying all the strands and sub-strands of the revised framework is the process of thinking and working mathematically. More about this in a moment. On average, across stages 1 to 6, there are 30% fewer learning objectives. But although the number of learning objectives has been reduced, the overall level of expectation in mathematics content at each stage remains pretty much the same as in the 2011 framework. The learning objectives have been substantially rephrased, with more emphasis on mathematical processes than on assessment outcomes. The progression within each stage and between stages has been improved to ensure greater continuity. One of the most substantial changes to the framework is the removal of the problem-solving strand and the introduction of the process of thinking and working mathematically. Thinking and working mathematically is not seen as a separate strand, but rather integrated within all the strands and substrands, as well as the learning objectives, and applies to all 6 stages. The process of thinking and working mathematically encourages learners to talk with others, challenge ideas, and to provide evidence that validates conjectures and solutions. When learners are thinking and working mathematically, they actively seek to make sense of ideas and build connections between different facts, procedures, and concepts. This supports higher order thinking and assists learners in viewing the world in a mathematical way. Thinking and working mathematically comprises 8 characteristics that are presented in 4 pairs: specializing and generalizing, conjecturing and convincing, characterizing and classifying, critiquing and improving. The 4 pairs of characteristics are represented in the thinking and working mathematically star. For more information about thinking and working mathematically and how Collins International Primary Maths supports this new and important feature of the revised Cambridge framework, go to the Thinking and Working Mathematically webinar or session 3 of the training package on the Collins website. Just like thinking and working mathematically, mental calculation is now integrated into the mathematical content of the learning objectives across all strands, not just the number strand. Specific mental strategies learning objectives have been removed in order to make the framework less prescriptive about the specific strategies that should be learned and practiced by learners at each stage. There is more of a recognition that working mentally is at the core of developing learners' mathematical understanding, and the need to give learners greater ownership over the mental strategies they choose to use, and of the need to apply these strategies to all aspects of their mathematics, not just calculations. The idea is to give both teachers and learners greater flexibility and, importantly, encourage learners to view mental strategies as a more personal and less formal choice. So, how does the new edition of Collins International Primary Maths meet the requirements of the revised Cambridge curriculum framework? Firstly, Collins International Primary Maths offers a rigorous and cohesive scope and sequence, or mathematics scheme of work, through the revised framework from stages 1 to 6. At the heart of the scheme is the teaching and learning cycle. Effective planning, teaching, and assessment are the 3 interconnected elements that contribute to promoting learning, raising learners' attainment, and achieving end-of-stage expectations, or mastery. All of the components in Collins International Primary Maths emphasise and provide guidance on the importance of the cyclical nature of teaching in order to ensure that learners reach the end-of-stage expectations of the Cambridge framework. This teaching and learning cycle and the important role that the teacher plays in this cycle are at the heart of Collins International Primary Maths. In addition, Collins International Primary Maths offers extensive teacher support through materials that promote the most effective pedagogical methods in the teaching of mathematics, are sufficiently detailed to aid confidence, while at the same time being rich enough to be varied and developed, take into account issues of pace and classroom management, and how these vary between classes. Give careful consideration to the key skill of appropriate and effective questioning. Provide a balance of teacher intervention and learner participation, a very important feature of interactive whole class teaching. Encourage communication of methods between teacher and learner, as well as between learners, and foster mathematical rigour. And finally, and most importantly, are aimed at raising levels of attainment for every learner, so that they develop the skills necessary to function as citizens who are autonomous problem solvers. Collins International Primary Maths is based on the Constructivist Model of teaching and learning developed by Piaget, Vygotsky, and later Bruner, and the importance of starting from what learners know and guiding thinking forwards, of learning the principles of a subject and the connections between ideas within the subject and across other subjects, of focusing on the process of learning rather than on assessing, of the importance of developing learners' thinking by asking questions and encouraging learners to ask questions themselves, of learning through discovery and problem solving, of using active methods that require rediscovering and reconstructing norms and truths, and using collaboration as well as individual activities so that learners learn from each other. And finally, the importance of evaluating the level of each learner's development so that suitable tasks can be set. At the core of the scheme are four of the major principles of Bruner's theory of instruction that characterise the organisation and content of Collins International Primary Maths. In particular, the teaching and learning opportunities in Collins International Primary Maths reflect Bruner's three modes of representations, whereby learners develop an understanding of a concept through the three progressive steps or representations of concrete, pictorial, and abstract, and that reinforcement of an idea or concept is achieved by going back and forth between these three representations. This model illustrates the 6 proficiencies in mathematics that Collins International Primary Maths believe learners need to command in order to become mathematically literate and achieve mastery of the subject at each stage of learning. All of the teaching and learning units throughout the course aim to achieve each of these 6 proficiencies in order to help teachers to establish successful mathematics learning. The scheme supports teachers in planning a successful mathematics program for their unique teaching context and ensures clear understanding of learners' prerequisite skills before undertaking particular tasks and learning new concepts. Consider progression from one lesson to another. Regular revisiting and extension of previous learning. A judicious balance of objectives and the time dedicated to each one. And the use of a consistent format and structure. The elements of Collins International Primary Maths that form the basis for planning can be summarised according to the 3 levels of planning. The Cambridge Curriculum Framework constitutes the long-term plan for schools to follow at each stage across the school year. By closely reflecting the framework and the Cambridge Primary Mathematics Scheme of Work, the course embodies this long-term plan. To ensure complete curriculum coverage and adequate revision of the learning objectives for each Cambridge primary stage, the learning objectives from the curriculum framework have been grouped into 27 topic areas or units. Each of the 27 units is designed to be taught over a period of 1 week. This example for Stage 3 shows how the 27 units in Collins International Primary Maths are organised according to the strands and sub-strands of the Cambridge framework. Also, as part of the medium-term plans, Collins International Primary Maths includes a recommended teaching and learning sequence for the 27 units. By using the Collins digital component, Teachers Resource Plus, these plans can be easily adapted to meet the specific needs of individual schools and teachers, as well as learners' needs. This example shows the recommended teaching and learning sequence for Stage 3. The next part of the teaching and learning cycle, and arguably the most important element, is teaching. Collins International Primary Maths believes in the importance of teachers promoting a can-do attitude where all learners can achieve success in and enjoy mathematics, of having high and ambitious expectations for all learners, of adopting a philosophy of equal opportunities with all learners having full access to the same curriculum content, generating high levels of engagement and commitment to learning, offering support and intervention that matches learners' needs, being language aware in order to understand the possible challenges and opportunities that language presents to learning, systematically and effectively checking learners' understanding, anticipating where they may need to intervene, and doing so with notable impact on the quality of learning. And finally, providing high quality marking and constructive feedback to ensure that learners make rapid gains. To help teachers achieve these goals, Collins International Primary Maths provides a highly effective and proven teaching and learning sequence that promotes whole class interactive teaching, providing clear directions, instructions, and explanations. Each lesson is divided into 6 key teaching strategies that take learners on a journey of discovery. This approach is shown on the outer ring of this diagram. The lesson begins with engagement, followed by teacher exposition, guided practice, independent practice, application, and finally review. The inner ring shows the link between these 6 key teaching strategies and the 5 phases of a Collins International Primary Maths lesson plan. The lesson sequence in Collins International Primary Maths focuses on supporting learners' understanding of the learning objectives from the Cambridge Curriculum Framework, as well as building their mathematical proficiency and confidence. The lesson begins with a 5-minute whole class warm-up activity called Revise, where learners consolidate fluency of previously learned facts, concepts and/or methods, and further develop oral skills. It's also an opportunity to revise any prerequisites for learning. This is followed by the main teaching input phase of the lesson, which involves direct whole class interactive teaching of the learning objectives, followed by guided practice from the student's book, which provides example questions that allows learners to work independently on the questions in the workbook. Teach is followed by individual paired and/or group practice, where learners work on questions from the workbook and/or additional practice activities to consolidate their learning. Conceptual and procedural variation builds fluency, deepens understanding, and provides differentiation. Immediately following practice, learners apply. They apply their knowledge, understanding, and skills to reason and solve related problems. The lesson concludes with bringing together the whole class for a 5-minute review, where learners reflect and share their learning, and provides an opportunity for teachers to gauge the level of understanding. Underpinning each phase of the lesson is the development of the thinking and working mathematically characteristics. Each lesson includes highly focused and clearly defined learning objectives. It includes targeted questioning aimed at encouraging and checking learner progress. Guided practice aims at preparing learners to work independently on questions in the workbook and is located in the student's book. Guided practice is immediately followed by independent, intelligent practice. Practice includes written activities at 3 levels of differentiation. Questions type set on a circle indicates that the question is suitable for learners who require additional support with either easier questions or revising prerequisite knowledge. Questions type set on a triangle indicates that the question is suitable for the majority of learners to practice and consolidate the lesson objective. Questions type set on a square indicates that the question is suitable for learners who require enrichment or extension. 2 individual paired or group practical hands-on learning activities are also provided in each unit. These are referred to as additional practice activities. These activities are aimed at developing both independence and collaboration, and to enable learners to develop their own thinking as well as learn from one another. Monitoring, evaluation, and feedback continue the teaching and learning cycle and are used to form the basis for adjustments to the teaching program. Collins International Primary Maths offers meaningful, manageable, and useful assessment on 2 of the following 3 levels. Short-term, ongoing assessments are an informal part of every lesson. A combination of carefully crafted recall, observation, and thought questions is provided in each lesson, and these are linked to specific learning objectives. They are designed to provide immediate feedback to learners and to gauge learners' progress in order to enable teachers to adapt their teaching. Each unit in Collins International Primary Maths begins with a unit introduction. One of the features of the unit introduction is common difficulties and remediation. This feature can be used to help identify why learners do not understand or have difficulty with a topic or concepts, and to use this information to take appropriate action to correct mistakes or misconceptions. Also included as part of the unit introduction is success criteria, which aims to assist teachers and learners in identifying the steps required to achieve the unit's learning objectives. Medium-term formative assessments are used to review and record the progress learners make over time in relation to the learning objectives of the framework. They are used to establish whether learners have met the learning objectives or are on track to do so. Assessment for learning is the term generally used to describe the conceptual approach to both short-term ongoing assessment and medium-term formative assessment. Assessment for learning involves learners and teachers discovering the specific strengths and weaknesses of individual learners and the class as a whole, and using this to inform future teaching and learning. The Collins International Primary Maths Progress Books are specifically designed to assist teachers in monitoring learners' progress, identifying and understanding learners' needs, evaluating evidence, and planning next steps for teaching and learning, all in order to help learners to make progress, raise their level of attainment, and achieve mastery. In order to assist teachers with making both short and medium-term assessments manageable, meaningful, and useful, Collins International Primary Maths includes a class record-keeping document. This document aims to help teachers identify whether learners are on track to meet end-of-stage expectations, identify those learners who are working above and below end-of-stage expectations, make long-term summative assessments, report to parents and guardians, and importantly, inform the next year's teacher which substrands of the Cambridge framework, individual learners, and the class as a whole are exceeding, meeting, or are below in expectations. Long-term summative assessment is the third level of assessment, and it's used at the end of the school year in order to track progress and attainment against school and external targets, and to report to other establishments and to parents on the actual attainment of learners. By ensuring complete and thorough coverage of the Cambridge framework, Collins International Primary Maths provides an excellent foundation for the Cambridge Primary end-of-stage tests, called Cambridge Primary Progression Tests, as well as the end of primary Cambridge Primary Checkpoint. For further information about the Cambridge Primary Curriculum Mathematics Framework, including Thinking and Working Mathematically, as well as how Collins International Primary Maths supports the Cambridge framework, details on the components of the scheme, and other webinars and PowerPoint presentations to use within your school, go to the training package available on the Collins website. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I hope you all enjoyed Peter's presentation and found it useful. Before we go into the Q&As, I just want to pick up one thing that I did spot on the chat box during the presentation, where people were concerned a little bit about some of the blurriness of some of the images. This may well be some of the spreads from the books that were as part of the presentation. As I think we've said, we have recorded it, so that is available for all of you who've attended to look at later, and others. The other thing that I think is worth just bearing in mind is that these books are also available now as digital sample books, so you can actually flick through at your own leisure. And if you're interested in having a look at the digital samples and you haven't already, then the email address that you'll see on the screen, the collins.international at harpercollins.co.uk, is the email to send it to. Drop us a note of who you are, what school you're at, and we can arrange digital samples for everything other than at the moment year 4, which I did answer during the presentation, which is I think available in the next week or so. So now we have a bit of time for questions and answers, as much time really as we need, up to an hour, but I suspect we'll have 10 minutes or so of questions. And we've got Holly on screen, as I mentioned before, the editor of this scheme, to help answer. So if you have any answers, put them in the question and answer box. We have one to get going with, which is, when should we get Maths Workbook 3 for Year 3 students, which I think, Holly, is either now digitally available or very imminent.
It should be, yeah. I think all of stage 3 should be on the
So I don't know whether that was just me or your volume was quite quiet in that.
Sorry, my microphone. Yeah, all of stage 3 should be on the ebook sample site now.
Yeah, excellent. I'm only experiencing one of our wonderful technical issues that we've all had with Zoom, where the microphone is not where it should be, but easily sorted. So we're still waiting for any more questions that people would have. The other one that's really important, I think, to just dwell on, and a question from us as much as anything else, and it came up in this morning's webinar, is sort of what are the key differences, do you think, between this edition and the previous edition?
So in terms of the content, that's where most of the key differences lie. The new Cambridge curriculum is quite different to the first one in that a lot of the objectives have been consolidated and reorganized, and the challenge level has sort of moved around between the stages. So content that was previously in stage 3 might now be in stage 2. So while we've tried to keep some of the elements from the first edition in the second, it has been comprehensively updated to match the new curriculum. But in terms of the similarities, we've tried where we can to keep the structure of the books and the structure of the lesson plan the same as it was for the first edition. So if you've already been using the course, there should be things that you recognise and mean that you can just switch over to the new course and accommodate the new objectives without really having to change too much about your teaching style, which hopefully will be welcome to current users of the Collins course.
Okay, excellent. So I've got a question that follows on from that. For those that are putting questions in, if your question doesn't come up in sort of first or before another question, I'm trying to put them through in sort of a good theme. And actually, this is a really good question following on from that. I mean, the question is, how effective is this edition from the previous one, which I think I would probably phrase, Holly, as, do you think that this second edition is more effective in the teaching of mathematics than the first one?
I think hopefully there's new elements, and we've been able to learn from feedback from teachers that have used the course to hopefully mean that the book is more effective than the first edition. Obviously, as we're getting the Cambridge endorsements through, it offers full coverage of all of the learning objectives, so you will be able to fully teach the Cambridge curriculum with the Collins course. But incorporating feedback like the need for more differentiation and more support for different learners is something that we've tried to do with this course, along with the introduction of Cambridge's new element of thinking and working mathematically, which is a new set of objectives that Peter talked about during his presentation video. So that's something that we've again incorporated throughout the Collins course, and you're fully supported in teaching using all of the different components of it.
Excellent. So the next question there is the number of units the same? Have units been deleted in the new edition from the previous edition?
So the organisation of some of the units has changed from the first edition just to accommodate the changes in the curriculum. And one of the things that we've done is streamline that across all of the stages. So whereas in our first edition, some of the stages might have had 20 units, some had 30, now we've consolidated it and they're all 27 units, split up hopefully into 9 units per term. So there's consistency there for teachers if you're working across different stages in your year groups, and also for learners as they progress through the stages, that there's the same number there. So the units have changed from the first edition, but hopefully in a way that's a bit more useful for teachers and learners.
Okay, excellent. So the next question on the list here is, I think, as much a request as a question, but could be referred to in terms of the development between the two, which is, could we have more questions on grade 1 and 2? And certainly in the first edition, there were less questions and on activities in grade 1 and 2 than from grade 3 upwards. How has that been addressed in the new edition?
So we've stuck with the structure of having a smaller workbook for stages 1 and 2, just to reflect the ability level and the kind of activities that they need to do at that stage. Obviously, as you move up the stages, there's more content to cover and more complex ideas to look at. But one of the ways that we've got more practice included is with the introduction of the progress books, which are additional components, and there's one for each stage, each of them being 64 pages, and that offers a double page spread per unit of additional practice that consolidates all of the knowledge that each learner is expected to have by the end of a unit, and allows teachers to fully see how their learners are attaining, and also for learners to put that into practice and have a little bit more development than they might have done just with the workbook.
Excellent. And that's obviously a new component as well. So that's above and beyond the first edition. Next question is, what are your suggestions for teachers who have to stick to 40-minute lessons? And that's always a tough question.
We've done quite a bit to try and accommodate that. Obviously, the lessons are sort of written under the assumption of a 60-minute lesson, but the introduction to the teacher's guide offers a lot of guidance for teachers that might not be working within those parameters, and tips for adapting lesson plans and adapting the scope and sequence of the course to make sure that you do have time to cover things. One of the things that we have in our recommended scope and sequence is a week of revision per term, and that means that it's open to teachers to use in whatever way they see fit, whether that's an opportunity to catch up on content that they haven't covered yet, but we also offer in the digital component the opportunity to create your own scope and sequence for the course and figure out where your units will sit in the best way for your teaching.
Okay, excellent. So the next question is, does this edition include activities for students, which I guess, Holly, is what we would find in the workbook?
Yes, yeah. So the workbook is full independent study for students, but there's also opportunities in the student book and in the teacher's guide for independent study, things like the guided practice in the student's book. And then we have the apply section of the lesson plan, which is mainly done on digital slides, which is a chance for learners to apply what they've learnt independently and practice that within the class. Okay.
Excellent. And a question here on really the format of Checkpoint and what we know. I suppose we can only answer from what we know about the format of the new Checkpoint. And the question is, for the new curriculum, are there any changes on the format of Checkpoint, such as duration of papers, usage of calculators? I mean, we can only answer to the best of our knowledge, but Holly, to the best of your knowledge?
I'm not particularly sure on duration of papers. There's definitely still usage of calculators, which is something that we've included in our course. So at the stages at which Checkpoint would expect learners to be using calculators, we've got activities to practice that and things. But yeah, it would be a thing for Cambridge to clarify.
So to be clear, we often don't see necessarily the Checkpoint assessment papers unless there's a really fundamental change to the method of assessment, which we would find out about. We don't necessarily know about the Checkpoint papers themselves until they're sat. So we are assuming no massive fundamental changes. Okay, next question. Did you keep the 3 challenge structure of the activities in the new editions of the activity books?
Yes, so they're all still labelled as challenge 1 to 3 with the differentiation, but they're kept as sort of shapes so that it's not direct ability labelling for learners.
Excellent. Right. This is the next one's quite an interesting question, and it may well be one that we both answer. It's certainly interesting in that the question is there something for early years 2 based on the year 1 learning objectives of the Cambridge curriculum? So, Holly, do you want to talk to that, or do you want me to?
I'm happy for you to.
Okay, excellent. No, that's fine. The reason why that we had that sort of discussion is that we've had a lot of feedback from schools that are starting teaching and teaching towards the year 1 learning objectives in KG or in reception or in a 2-year KG structure. Because of that, because of the feedback we've had, we are currently working with all of the authors and people who've advised us before on maths, but also on science and English, in doing a kindergarten stroke reception course. So we are not planning to publish that at the same time. It's a little bit later on, but a really comprehensive structured kindergarten course with teachers' resources and pupils' resources. My other answer on that would be, if any of the people that are listening would like to know more about that KG course, or indeed would like to tell us about their experiences of teaching in the run-up to the year 1 learning objectives, then please drop us a line on the Collins International email address, and it'll probably come through to me, and we can start a discussion with the relevant editors in that area. Because they're looking at this moment for feedback. We don't envisage publishing for another 12 months or so, but we will have it available as soon as we can. But we have seen that as a need. So please drop us a line, and we can have a conversation separately on that. Okay, next question. In the first edition, there were less number of word problems. For that purpose, we're required to refer to other books. Are we going to have more in the workbook, or have it now in the workbook?
I'd say that we definitely have included word problems in the workbook, but they tend to sometimes sit in other sections of the lesson plan. So sometimes there's quite a few of them in the student's book, and in the guided practice there's a lot of abstract activities that refer to real life scenarios and that kind of thing. And we've also got those built into lesson plans for teachers to do as part of group activities, and also in the digital slides that are part of the apply section. These quite often fall back on scenario-based work and word problems there.
Okay, excellent. I know we've certainly still got a couple of questions left that I've seen. I'm going to ask those. So first of all, in which book are the answers? I think that's the teacher's guide, but over to you.
Yep, so workbook answers are at the back of the teacher's guide, and student book answers are generally embedded within lesson plans for teachers to read through.
Perfect. And in terms of measurement and currency, what is the default that we use?
So the Cambridge curriculum focuses on metric measurements for geometry measure units, and in terms of money, these are generally, for the Collins course, we've used dollars as a sort of generic currency, but where the curriculum requires variations and comparisons, we've used a few more international currencies. So it should be quite streamlined throughout.
Okay, excellent. So just a bit of time for a couple more questions. I've got a couple here. So first one, are there any interactive tools available for each lesson?
Yep, absolutely. So these are part of the Extended Teacher's Guide digital content, which is available on our website. And these tools are built for the different strands of the curriculum and allow teachers to use them often in place of concrete resources. So things like a measuring tool, a clock tool, a number line tool. So they're all made to fit with the course and offer opportunities for digital work.
Okay, excellent. So jumping around a bit, next question is why is the 3D shaped cone omitted in the new edition?
As far as I'm aware, it is in the curriculum, but from comparisons between the first edition and the second edition, I think it is appearing later in the course. So it's in some of the higher stages, whereas previously I think it was included with the stage 3 3D shapes at that point. So it's just slightly higher up.
It may well be in that stage 4 book that we haven't yet had the digital samples of. I'm going to sort of ask 2 more questions, I think, both of which we've got, both of which are really very good questions. First question, are there half-termly or termly assessment papers available linked to the study book?
I think the most suitable thing that we're offering for these is the progress books that we've talked a little bit about. These are condensed versions of the workbook offering really concentrated practice of the key learning objectives for that unit, and it's a chance for teachers and learners to assess their ability and see whether they're performing under or above the expectations that they need to be to progress to the next stage. So these are available for all 6 stages and offer that additional practice. So they can work both as sort of informal practice in the classroom, or teachers might choose to use them as slightly more formal assessment for record keeping.
Yeah. So just for everyone, so we're publishing those as a teacher's resource. We're not allowed to publish endorsed assessment of any kind, so they won't be part of the endorsed part of the course, but they will be part of the course and they will provide that opportunity for assessment, and that's done very specifically. I think we've answered the question about the digital activities in a different sort of way with the interactive activities that are part of Teachers Guide Plus. So I'm going to finish off with possibly one of the toughest questions to put you on the spot with, Holly. And it was asked also this morning in the webinar in a different way. So the question is, what is the biggest advantage using Colin's book compared to books from other publishers?
So as I sort of said in this morning's session, I'll treat that as the 3 kind of really key things that I think we've done well in this course and should make us stand out, hopefully. The first being our treatment of thinking and working mathematically, which is the new element to the Cambridge curriculum. This is something that is entirely new and is a new concept both to Cambridge and teachers, so it's something that we knew that we needed to support everyone in using and make it really clear and spelled out for them. And our treatment of it, Cambridge have praised how clear it is and how well embedded throughout the course. Cambridge are very keen that TWM is not treated as a standalone objective, much as problem solving was in the first edition. So we've incorporated it fully throughout all of the units and across all of the components. So regardless of your learner's ability level or which component they're using at the time, they'll hopefully be practicing TWM and be aware of it as well. It's not a sort of passive thing. Our course has really put it at the forefront of each lesson. And then the second advantage, I'd say, is to do with the focus we've put on differentiation. Someone asking earlier whether we'd kept that, so obviously hopefully it's something that people like. We've got differentiation happening in various different places of the course, largely in the workbook with the different types of activities, but also throughout the Teacher's Guide lesson plans to offer advice to teachers on how they can change the requirements of the lesson to suit the needs of different learners and either support or enhance their learning depending on what level they're working at. And finally, the third advantage, I think, of our course is the focus on concrete pictorial and abstract representations that we've used, which I think makes it a truly international course that doesn't require any particular resources and offers different variations for teachers to build the lesson based on what they have available to them. So there's either photocopyable worksheets at the back of the Teacher's Guide, or we've got the digital tools and slides with the word problems that I was talking about earlier. That just means that regardless of the resources that your school and your classroom has, you should be able to teach the Collins course fully and without feeling that your learners aren't getting what they need out of it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Holly. A good question to end on. I just want to reiterate my thanks to Holly for coming and doing the question and answers on the spot, and actually my thanks to all you participants who've asked some really good questions and some tough questions to put Holly on the spot, but we obviously enjoy interaction and asking those questions. As I say, if there's any further feedback you want or follow-up you want, do email us at collins.international@harpercollins.co.uk, the email address you see on screen. And all it remains for me to say is thank you for coming to our webinar. Thank you, everyone.